Students have been so used to writing essays for class, a US history class. Okay, what started the Civil War? Or what was the root cause of the end of the Civil War? So it's very easy for them to regurgitate facts that they get from, their textbook, from class, from Google, but a personal statement isn't just something you can whip out after one night kind of thing. So it really takes a lot of thought and it takes a lot of personal reflection. So it's really important to start that as early as possible. So the academic and personal profiles are equally important. And at Think Tank Learning, we utilize something called the three-circle philosophy. So every time a student walks through our doors and we sit down with them and we work with them, we make sure that we address all three of these circles because all three are really crucial to college admissions. So, of course, we have the GPA, we have the tests, we have the EA. So you can see it's a little bit of that academic / personal profile right there. So in a nutshell, what can you do to maximize your chances of getting in? So GPA, I want to say that, before a student is even read by an admissions officer, they look to see what kind of classes has a student been taking in high school. Have they been only taking the regular classes where they could have been taking honors AP classes? How much are they challenging themselves? It's not enough to get straight A's in all your regular classes. You really should be taking the hardest possible classes as possible as well as excelling in them. So that's course rigor, so how challenging are your classes, your academic ability, often reflected in your grades, and you finally have trend. So what trend means is that are your grades going up, are they staying the same, or are they decreasing from 9th to 12th grade? College admissions officers, they don't penalize students for getting, relatively low marks in 9th grade because they understand, it's a big step from middle school to high school. And, oftentimes they're in a new environment, they're developing socially and emotionally and psychologically. So, it's as long as you are progressing in your grades, as long as your grades are going from B's to B plus to A, that's something that a lot of times private schools look at. And yeah, come on in. And I should mention at this point too, the UCs, they only look at the 10th and 11th grade. So the UC GPA doesn't even count 9th and 12th grade. Of course, you have to do well in them, and of course, they see those grades, but when they formulate the UC GPA, they only take into account 10th and 11th grade. Test scores, my favorite topic. So I don't particularly feel that test scores, really reflect a student's ability to succeed in college, but when you have 80,000 applications at UCLA and everyone has a 4.0, there has to be some sort of distinguishing factor that the admissions officers use. And what they're using now is the SAT. And I don't know how many of you have been reading the news lately, but there was an article that came out, and the College Board is going to actually be changing the format of the SAT. This may not happen next year, but it will definitely happen in the next 3 or 4 years. So for those of you who have 9th graders or younger kids, you might want to sort of keep abreast of the changes in the SAT. So it's not just the SAT. I put in all of these tests right here. We have the SAT, which is, of course, the most popular, especially in California. However, I do want to point out there are other alternatives for your students. All schools accept either the SAT or ACT. In my 6 years of college admissions counseling, I have never come across a school that says, no, we don't want the ACT. And I think it's really important to note this distinction because a lot of times, students, they might do better on the ACT. The ACT is a much more content-driven test. It tests less of your analytical and critical reasoning skills, and it has a science section as well. So I encourage students to take both tests as early as possible to see what they do better on. So, they have a lot of, new kind of tools for students to succeed now as compared to when I was in school. So they have this thing called score choice. So what score choice is you can actually pick and choose which scores you want to send to the colleges. So again, it's better to take both the SAT and ACT. I would encourage students to not take it more than 3 times because we see from a lot of statistics and data that students really don't get remarkably better at taking the test after the 3rd time. So, I would kind of stop at 3, but of course, I've had students who've taken it 3, 4, 5. I even had one student who took the SAT 6 times. 6 times, and that was a little excessive, but he did end up getting into a top school, but we chose to only send his top SAT score. So that's something a lot of parents, a lot of students may not know. When you send your College Board scores, make sure that you don't send all of them, and as long as the school utilizes score choice. Of course, there are schools that really discourage this kind of thing. Yale comes to mind. They want, and Stanford as well. They want to see all the scores, but again, we can get into the legality of that later. I'm an attorney as well. I passed the California State Bar, and I always keep these sort of ethical considerations in mind whenever I work with students. We have the SAT subject tests as well. So 2 years ago, the UCs actually stopped requiring students to send in SAT subject tests, but the higher you get in the admissions tiers, UC Berkeley, UCLA, top tier schools, they often say that SAT subjects are recommended. We always tell students they are required. So you really should take the SAT subject tests that play up to your strengths. We also have schools with policies where they do require math and science SAT subject test scores, especially if a student is applying to their engineering school. So that's just something to keep in mind. And it's always best to take these tests the spring or the summer after you finish the AP course. A lot of times, it's pretty easy to forget a lot of the material once the summer passes. So I always encourage kids to take them, in May and June. The other thing to note about SAT subject tests is if a student takes a language test, so the Chinese listening test, they should always take it in November because it's the only month that the SAT subject test is offered with the listening. So always take that in November. So of course we have AP tests. So this, this seminar, this talk isn't going to go into too much detail about all these things, but the only thing I would have to say about AP tests is that it just goes to show a student's rigor and the fact that they've challenged themselves. If they've taken an AP class, then they really should take the AP exam and try to score as well as they can. But it doesn't really factor into college admissions. They don't always scrutinize these scores, but as long as you're getting 3s, 4s, or 5s, then it's fine to put it on your application. And then of course we have Toefl for students who their first language is not English. A lot of times international students have to take the Toefl. And then STAR, of course, is the high school standardized test that people take. But these two, the AP tests and STAR, really doesn't play a huge factor in college admissions, but it can, help a student if they're excelling in those two things. Okay, extracurricular activities. I had a lot of hands about wanting me to talk about extracurricular activities, and I'll go into detail a little later, but EAs what we call extracurricular activities. EAs, it's most important to, again, be unique and be consistent. If you're going to start something in 9th and 10th grade, then it's always better to continue that through 11th and 12th grade and not drop it. College admissions officers really love to see that consistency in students. Okay, so a little bit about how to plan your academic year. A big component of what we do at Think Tank Learning is we advise students on what kinds of classes to take, how many honors AP classes to take, because I think it's important, especially in the very intensive high schools. A lot of students, they take all the honors and AP classes, but then they end up getting Bs. One of the most frequently asked questions that I get from students as well as parents is it better to get a B in an AP class as opposed to an A in a regular class? And the answer is always, it depends. Are you trying to get to Stanford, or are you trying to get to UC San Diego or UC Davis or UC Santa Barbara? Really, for the UCs especially, they do give 1 extra point for an AP class. So to them, a B in an AP class is actually the same as an A in a regular class because you get that extra point for AP. But I would really encourage students to challenge themselves. Again, as I had said before, a student who gets A's in all of their regular classes as compared to a student who gets A's and maybe a few sprinkling of B's, but they're taking only honors AP classes, that only makes the student look a little bit better than that other student. So my answer would be, it's always better to take the most challenging class as possible and just try to do as well as you can in it. So that's sort of the first bullet point, is choose rigorous courses. Second, of course, earn high grades. A lot of times we have students with so much potential, but they just don't know how to organize themselves. They're not diligent in their time management. They often study or do homework in front of TV, or they have their Facebook open, their Facebook chat, GChat. A lot of these things really make a difference. And one of my biggest tips for students is to use that academic planner. A lot of schools give out those free planners, and students never even look at it after their first day of school. And I think that having a very